In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Squirreled Away Commander deck, which is the third of 4 decks for Bloomburrow that'll be releasing on August 2nd. But the question is this one any good? Let's take a look. Thanks again everyone for being here. I do appreciate each and every one of you that take the time to watch the videos. Be sure to hit that like button if you do like it and click subscribe. About 85 to 90% of people who watch the videos are not subscribed, and there's been a lot of views, so if even a few of you take the time to subscribe, it'll definitely do a lot to help the channel going forward. So I very much appreciate anyone who takes the time to do that. And of course, be sure to click that bell if you want to be notified when new videos are posted. So as I said in the intro today, we are going to be talking about the Squirreled Away Commander deck. Now this one is very weirdly selling at a much higher rate on eBay than the others, which is really interesting because on Amazon, as of the recording of this video anyhow, it was still available for $47 with Prime shipping. So I don't know where the markup is coming from. Obviously, I think the deck has a lot of really strong cards. I've seen a few already in this particular deck, so, you know, whatever that's worth. I do think that it's a very, very interesting, but I would always caution just, you know, don't spend too much money on this. Because I think, you know, you'll be able to hopefully find it at retail, or I would imagine. I mean, either that or maybe I'm just misreading the situation, but it seems like people are prematurely spending a lot on this because we've gotten a couple of good reveals. I digress. We'll go ahead and jump into the actual video here and start talking about the cards. Starting off with the commanders, we've got Hazel of the Rootbloom. This one is a really, really well-designed card in my opinion. It is 2 black-green legendary creature Squirrel Druid. You can tap it and pay 2 life, tap X untap tokens you control, add X mana in any combination of colors. At the beginning of your end step, create a token that's a copy of target token you control. If that token is a squirrel, instead create tokens that are 2 copies of it. If you guys are familiar with squirrels in Commander, obviously Chatterfang has been extremely popular and is really, really quite powerful. It makes a, you know, anytime you make a token, you make a squirrel as well. So Chatterfang has definitely been one of the better commander options, but this one may actually take the cake here in terms of being better as the commander and allowing you to play Chatterfang in 99. You know, paying 2 life is not that big of a deal in commander, and being able to tap tokens to add mana in a deck that generally is going to be able to utilize treasure tokens and food tokens and all the extra squirrels, you have access to a lot of mana pretty quickly, and, you know, being able to also essentially populate your tokens at the end of the turn is certainly really strong. And you have cards like Doubling Season, Parallel Lives that we talk about a lot with a lot of these token strategies. No exception here. Obviously, we'll just create some wild token population with this card. And yeah, I think this is just overall a really strong card that's going to be a good commander. And I understand why this is, you know, as popular as it is, because it looks like there's going to be a lot of nuts things you can do with it. Next up, we've got the Odd Acorn Gang, which I like the art. It's a flavor win. 3 black-green legendary creature Squirrel Warrior with Menace, Trample, and Reach. The squirrels you control have tap. Target squirrel gets +2/+2 and gains Trample until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Whenever 1 or more squirrels you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So for 5 mana, this does have a lot of keywords on it, which is always nice to see in the sense that you feel like you're getting something akin to what you paid. The second effect is really interesting because if you have a way to make a lot of squirrel tokens, which obviously we know this deck can do, you can really kind of buff even this guy up pretty significantly. And then with Menace and everything else, swing for a lot of damage very quickly if he's the commander. And then, you know, the draw power is decent. It's not like Toski rule where it's like each time you draw a card for each one that hits. It's just blanket kind of 1 or more squirrels, but still, it's overall a solid card. Unfortunately, it just feels like it falls short when compared to Hazel. But it might even be decent in the main, you know, part of your deck, regardless, with Hazel as the commander or Chatterfang as the commander. I don't necessarily think this one is enough to warrant that. I don't think it's enough to warrant that inclusion as the commander because I just think the other 2 options do a lot more for you. Sword of the Squeak is a 2-drop artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control with base power or toughness 1. Whenever a hamster, mouse, rat, or squirrel you control enters, you may attach Sword of the Squeak to that creature, equip 2. I love this card, obviously, play on Sword of the Meek. It's just the title is very funny, and it's cute. It works quite well with, honestly, a few different, you know, archetypes that have come out here, and obviously, within this deck, you're making a ton of 1/1 squirrels, and the base power is all that matters, so you can make your small creature get pretty damn powerful just with a few turns of things going on to the point where your opponents are going to want to maybe try to stop that. But what's cool about this, of course, is that if, let's say, the creature it's equipped to dies, you play another squirrel, rat, mouse, hamster. I don't know what hamsters there are other than like maybe Minsk and Boo, but maybe I'm missing some. It's just going to automatically attach to it. You don't have to worry about paying the cost. So it's really cool in that sense, and in the aggro token strategy, I do think it's going to be pretty good. Swarmyard Massacre is 3 and 2 black sorcery. Create 2 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. Then, each creature that isn't an insect, rat, spider, or squirrel gets -1/-1 till end of turn for each creature you control that is an insect, rat, spider, or squirrel. It costs 1 more than Damnation, but it's got the potential to be a lot more devastating for your opponents and a lot less harmful to you. Obviously, if you have a good mixture of squirrels out on the board and you play this, you're essentially gonna, Toxic Deluge your opponent's boards, but your squirrels or spiders, rats, whatever, insects are not going to be affected by this, so you can kind of wipe the board and then just free yourself up to swing for massive damage. It's definitely pretty good because of the fact that it doesn't affect your creatures as long as, you have only the outline creatures there, which I know is a little bit of a redundant, pseudo-obvious statement, but the point I'm trying to make here is that this is actually, in my opinion, worth consideration in the deck, not because it's a better version of Damnation. Obviously, it costs 1 more, but paying 1 more to be able to wipe the board and keep most of your stuff is generally a pretty good trade-off. Next up, we've got Rootcast Apprenticeship, which is 3 and a green sorcery. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Put 2 +1/+ encounters on target creature. Create a token that's a copy of target token you control. Target player creates a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. Target opponent sacrifices a non-token artifact. These utility cards are always kind of cool, and there's definitely a good bit of things going for it. Obviously, you're paying 4 mana. You can put 6 +1/+ counters on a creature. You can create 3 copies of tokens, etc. Obviously, some of these plays may depend on whether or not you have, Chatterfang out, Doubling Season, Parallel Lives. Can you make, a bunch of tokens off of this? Can you, make copies of maybe some other tokens if you're playing things like Helm of the Host? I mean, there's obviously a lot of different directions in which you can go for token decks in general, but as it pertains to squirrels, based on my experience playing the deck, it looks like it would be a card that you'd probably want to include in there. Yeah, it's not terrible. Being able to put the tokens there and also have the ability to benefit other green decks in general, pretty solid combination. We've got Scurry of Squirrels. This is 2 and a green, a creature squirrel scout with double myriad. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+ counter on target creature you control. So obviously, double myriad means you're going to make 2 copies of it for each opponent. So let's say you swing at one opponent, and it's going to, I think it would be, I don't remember exactly how it works, but I think it's going to be 6 probably. And then, if all 6 of them have damage, you can stack a bunch of counters up on stuff, even though the myriad copies get sacrificed. Overall, just a really, really cool card. And it's not very costly, and it's always good to get more squirrels that are just playable in general, because for so long, some of the squirrels we had were only really good because they were squirrels versus being like actually good, like this card feels like it is. Insatiable Frugivore is 3 and a black. Creature, rat, berserker. When it enters, create a food token, then you may exile 3 cards from your graveyard. If you do, repeat this process. You can pay 3 and a black, sacrifice X foods. Creatures you control get +X/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. I think this is weird play on it. So obviously the food token is interesting enough, and then exiling cards, that part of it I don't really see too much benefit for in this deck. I mean, you're not necessarily going to be guaranteed to just fill the graveyard up quickly, although it doesn't care if it's permanent. So if you're playing stuff that mills, I suppose you have that going for you. But the second effect is also not bad, especially when you consider the fact that it's either going to be played in rats, where you have a ton of cheap creatures that stack off each other's stats, or it's going to be played in the squirrel deck where it's included and you have a lot of tokens. Being able to give things, sack 2 or 3 foods, everything +3, and then they all get menace, it makes it a lot harder for your opponent to block those things, and then you have the ability to get through with a lot more damage. So overall, it's pretty good, but it's not, mind-blowing. I just think it's good for buffing, and it'll be more devastating if you have a ton of tokens out as you're using it. Hazel's Brewmaster is 3 and a black creature, squirrel warlock with menace. Whenever it enters or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and create a food token. Foods you control have all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Hazel's Brewmaster. This card reminds me of Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Very, very interesting if you're making a lot of food. Obviously, in terms of activated abilities, I can't think off the top of my head of some of the most devastating examples that you can have, but you can think of anything. I'll give you a very basic, banish, exile a mana dork perhaps from an opponent's graveyard, and then your food can tap for mana. And that's just kind of like a very low to the ground, like first thing that comes to my brain combo you can make with it. But being able to give your foods those abilities of what you're exiling, especially depending on what decks your opponent's playing, is a really cool concept, and it definitely has the ability to be a lot stronger than it may seem on paper. But getting rid of problematic things in the grave and also copying the effects of some of those problematic things, pretty much a win-win all around. I think it's just really good. Gorman's Talent is 1 green enchantment. It is a class enchantment. It says during your turn, artifacts you control are foods in addition to their other types and have 2 sacrifice this artifact, gain 3 life. If you level it up to 2, whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, create a 3/3 green raccoon creature token. And whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. That's the level 3 ability. Overall, it falls in line with a lot of the other talent spells. Just very strong. Very, very solid. Doesn't cost a ton, and it can do a good bit. Being able to turn your other artifacts into food will obviously synergize extremely well in a dedicated food deck. I wouldn't just splash this into anything, but it's actually not bad, and it does work well with some of the cards that we've actually gotten in the main Bloomburrow set, so it has that going for it too. And finally, we've got Moonstone, Eulogist. This is 3 black creature, bat warlock with flying. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you create a blood token. Whenever you sack an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on this card and gain 1 life. This one is, okay. I mean, giving you blood tokens is definitely not bad. And the interesting part of it is that you can use cards like your commander to tap those blood tokens to get mana. So there is the benefit of being able to, like, mass put tokens out whenever an opponent's creature dies. Blood tokens are inherently weaker, I think, in some cases, because, you know, they don't necessarily generate you a ton of advantage. It's more hand fixing, but that can still be pretty good too, depending on, you know, when you're using it and how often you're able to pull it off. I digress. It's all right. I think it's going to have a place in some decks. I don't know if it's really good in the Squirrel deck specifically, but, you know, that's kind of neither here nor there at the moment. Now, for the Squirrel deck, it looks like the reprint card in this for the Planeswalker is going to be Garrick, which is kind of interesting. He looks cool. We know for a fact that the Chatterfang is in the deck, which I think is a great reprint in general, but Chatterfang has 2 alternate art variants that are going to be in collector boosters only that are wildly popular already, and they look awesome. They're really cool. So hopefully, if you're looking to bling out your deck, you'll be able to get some of those. I'm a little bit bummed out that Pitiless Plunderer is not included in here, just because I think that card's, like, so absolutely bonkers with Chatterfang specifically, but with the Squirrel stuff in general. And so it would have been a good opportunity to, like, double down on putting him in here, but he has dropped a bit in price after being included in the Fallout decks too. So, you know, it's not the most expensive card, but it's definitely also, like, probably a must-play card in that sense, you know, for whatever it's worth. That's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you guys think of this deck, of the Squirreled Away. Are you planning on getting it? I think I'm going to be getting the bird one, as I talked about in our last video, but I'm interested to hear what people are looking to build and what everyone's theory crafting, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.